Hi again, Jess with KnotSewOrdinary. I'm going to go ahead and do a tutorial of my koozies. And specifically it's going to be my 30 to 32 ounce cold cup koozie that I'm going to be doing. A few things that we're going to need for this are going to be a 4.5 millimeter hook. I do have a needle to be able to weave in some ends at the end. I use a stitch marker. You can use a paper clip, a bobby pin, a piece of string, and a pair of scissors. I'm using a worsted weight yarn, and then this is going to be in two-tone, so I have two colors. What I'm going to go ahead and do is start with a magic circle. If you don't know how to do a magic circle, I would suggest looking up on Google. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but there are a lot of tutorials on Google or YouTube where you can figure out how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and chain one, and then in the magic circle I'm going to do 8 double crochets, okay. After you have the 8, you're going to pull that magic circle closed to create that circle. I like to work over my ends so I don't have to weave them in at the end. I'm just going to count because this looks short. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think I did short myself, so I'm going to go back in and do just one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's my okay. Reclose that. So into the first stitch, we're going to do an increase every stitch around. So we're going to go from 8 to 16. I am going to use a stitch marker on my first stitch. I just like to do that to verify that I have the right amount of stitches. So again, for round 2, I'm going to go ahead and do an increase in every stitch. Increase in all 8 stitches is going to bring the final stitch count at the end of this row is going to be 16. The last little bit of my tail pretty much tucked in there now. Alright, that's the end of that round. I just work in continuous rounds here as well, so my next stitch is going to go directly in there. There's no slipping, no chain one. So we're going to work half double crochets again. I like to work in the back loop and then that third loop behind. So we're going to do 1 single crochet in that first stitch and then 2 single crochet into the next stitch. We're going to repeat that all the way around. So it's going to be 1 single crochet, 1 increase. So at the end of this round, instead of having 16, we should have 24. Again, this stitch we're going to do 1 half double crochet. The next stitch is going to be 2 half double crochets in the same stitch. That's our increase. repeating that all the way around here. Just going to count and double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22. That's what I thought. Do my last increase. 20. Did it in the wrong hole. Doing that back loop. Okay, my increase 23 and 24. So now that we have 24 stitches, that's as wide as I want the bottom, the base to be. So now we're going to start working on going upward. So we're not going to do any increases on this next round. We're just going to again go on that back and that third loop. Do 1 single crochet in every stitch around. So we are going to continue with 24 stitches total around, and all that's going to do is start making it curve upward, because we've got the bottom covered now. Now we want to start working up the bottoms, the sides at the bottom there. No increases this round. We started with 24, we should end with 24. And again, I'm doing the back loop and then that third loop, the one back behind, and I'm leaving the front loop alone. I'm not doing anything in there. And now that I'm coming up to the end here, my final stitch right here. So what that, leaving that front loop is doing is it's kind of causing this little spiral look to it, if you can see. So it's kind of just creating an extra depth to the cup bottom. Now you can see it's starting to take a little bit of shape here. So the next round we're going to keep going into that back loop and third loop. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that first stitch. I'm going to put in my stitch marker. We're going to do 5 stitches. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to do an increase, 2 half double crochets in the same stitch, do 5 more stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll do another increase. This is our second increase of this round. We've got 2 more to go. So we'll do 5 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase. Last round here, or last repeat, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then in this last available stitch we're going to do that increase. There's 1 and 2. So we went from 24 in the round to now it's 28. The reason for that is because the bottom of the cup is going to start going outward and we need to increase a little bit. So for the next 2 rounds we're just going to do 28 of those half double crochets in the back loop and then that third loop back behind. So 28 stitches for the next round. The round after that will be the exact same thing, another 28 stitches. Because this is a repetitive round, I'm going to go ahead and pause until I finish my 2 rounds of 28 and I will see you there. Alright, I'm back and I have just this one final half double crochet on that second round of 28 stitches. Go ahead and remove my stitch marker, and I'm going to do just that third loop only. I'm going to go ahead and do one single crochet into that back third loop only. Put my hook, or put my marker back in. So that third loop only. So when you're doing your stitches, you have the little V. Those are the front loop, the back loop, and then back behind here are these stitches. Those are the back loops that I'm working through. So in those, I'm going to do one single crochet, a single crochet this time, in just that third loop. And I'm going to go all the way around. So it's going to be a 28 stitches altogether on this round. And then at the end of this round, we're going to go ahead and cut off this color. If you're doing a two-tone, if you're going to do all one color, you don't have to cut off at this point. But there is another part of the process that I highly suggest at this point. So let me just get to the end of this row and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, I have about 5 stitches left. Okay, so now I am going to go through the regular stitch, the V. I'm going to go under both front and back loop. I'm going to pull my string through and I'm just going to do that slip knot. I am going to pull my hook up a little bit so that loop is kind of there. I am going to, because I'm going to do a color change, I'm going to cut my yarn. If you want all one color, go ahead and leave your yarn attached. However, at this point, what I would suggest is blocking, because right now it's kind of, it kind of holds its shape, but it's not sturdy. What I do at this point is I take a pint glass. I have a couple of pint glasses. I just wet my fabric a little bit and then I place it on the base of that cup. Now this is called blocking. What it is it's just kind of getting that yarn, this piece that you made, and it's kind of making it hold its shape. So I did one last night, and I blocked it. So if you can see the difference, this one's kind of, it's got the shape, but it's just loose and flippy floppy, whereas this one that was wet and dried on the base of that cup, it really is holding its shape much better. So I very much suggest blocking your material. I'm going to go ahead and put the one I just crocheted aside, and I'm going to switch over to the one that I blocked last night to move on. Okay, so it's the exact same thing that I did. And again, because we were doing the back loop and that third loop in the back, and that is causing this real nice little line here. And then when I did just that back loop, or that third loop only on that last single crochet row, it just left a real nice border. And that's why I like to do my color change at this point, because what we're going to do now is start making some puff stitches. So again, I'm going to grab my second color, which I started off with sage. My next color is going to be a beige. So I'm just going to do a little slip through that hoop, the loop that's already there. I'm going to do one chain. I'm going to hold my 2 loose ends over the stitches, because I'm going to work over them because I don't like weaving in. Now we're going to do a puff stitch, which if you don't know a puff stitch, real easy. You want to just yarn over, go into that stitch, grab it, pull it up, so you've got 3 strings on your hook, yarn over, go back through that stitch again, yarn over, pull up. So now you should have 5 strings or loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over, go into the hook, grab, pull up, Now there should be 7. That was 3 times we've done this. We're going to do that a 4th time. So after you've pulled up 4 times and you have all of those strings on here, you're going to grab and pull all the way through all of them. Then to secure it, you're going to do a stitch, and then you're going to chain 1. We're going to skip a stitch down here and do another puff stitch. And for this round, whoops, I was going to do a stitch. For this round, what we're going to do is puff stitch, chain 1, skip 1, puff stitch, and that's what we're going to do the entire way around for this row. Okay, chain 1, skip 1, and it's kind of weird for me to see my stitches because I'm working over my yarn right now, but it will be gone soon. There's 2, here's 3, the 4th one I'm pulling up, go through all of those, pull through to secure it, chain 1, skip 1, go to the next. 1, 2, 3, and last one is 4. I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this little extra yarn off so I can quit going over it. It's secured enough. Alright, pull your string through, secure it, chain 1, skip a stitch, and so on. So we are going to keep going with the puff stitches, chain 1, skip 1 all the way around. Since we had 28 stitches, there should be 14 puff stitches at the end of this round. If you need to check, there should be 14 puff stitches, 14 chain 1s or skipped spaces, and then the 14 and 14 come to the 28 stitches around. You want to make sure that you're not adding or losing any stitches in each round because you want it to keep its uniform shape, to expand out and not like cinch in, or you just want to make sure that you have the correct count every round. Okay, we've got a few more to go here. Cinch, chain, I'm going to skip 1, go in, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, pull through all of them, secure it, chain 1, skip 1, puff stitch. Okay, pull through, secure, oops, I lost it, secure it, chain 1, skip 1. Just about 2 more to go here. Last puff stitch for this round. We're going to pull through, we're going to secure it, we're going to do that last chain 1, don't forget, because we're going to skip that stitch. And now we're going to go into the top of that first puff stitch we made and just slip stitch through to secure it. And there is that first round of puff stitches. So the next round here is, and I like to use a stitch marker here just to make sure I have the exact amount always. You're going to do a single crochet in the top of that puff stitch, 1 single crochet in that single crochet in between the puff stitches, 1 on the puff stitch, 1 in between the puff stitch. You're going to do that all the way around. So what you are doing is 1 single crochet in every stitch around. At the end of this round you should still have your 28 single crochets. So this is a real easy round. You just go in between the 2 puff stitches. Right at the very top of that puff stitch you can see there's a stitch there that you should be able to go through. So a single crochet through that, through the between puff stitch, between puff stitch, between, and so on. So we are already almost to the end of this round. It goes really rather quick. All right, just a few left here. All right, puff stitch, and that in between, and then we're going to go ahead and slip stitch into that first single crochet we did on top of that puff stitch. Okay, slip knot, or a slip stitch, I'm sorry. So then I'm going to go ahead and chain one. I don't need my slip stitch or my stitch marker on this one. So at this point we have a nice base to start with. We're going to repeat and do the puff stitches. So exactly like we did with this row, we're going to do puff stitch, chain one, skip one, puff stitch, do the exact same thing, so you on this next row have 28 stitches again. So 14 puff stitches, 14 single crochets or chain ones. At the end of that row, you're going to slip into the top of that. The row after that, you're going to do another single crochet all the way around. What we want to do is have 3 of these sets. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with my puff stitches here. I'm going to go ahead and do most of this off camera because it's going to be repeating exactly what we did. If you need to rewind the video and watch that over 2 more times, that's fine. So again, I did that chain one. Now I'm going to do my first puff stitch in that first single crochet of this round. I'm going to secure it, chain one. I'm going to skip that next stitch, and then we're going to do a puff stitch right here. Come through, secure it, chain one, skip one. So again, we're just repeating the same thing. At the end of this round, you're just going to slip to the top of the first puff stitch, and you're going to do 1 single crochet all the way around, making sure that you are keeping 28. If you don't have 28, you're going to want to go back and find where the mistake was and get it fixed. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and do the rest of these off camera, and then once we have 3 rows of these puff stitches and then single crochets on top of them, I will join you back. All right. Okay, I am back. So I'm at the end of the 3rd row of puff stitches. Now, before I said to do the single crochet row as well, I take that back. So as you're coming up to the end of your 3rd row of these puff stitches, there's my final puff stitch. I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch into the top of that first puff. And again, that is my 3 rows of puff stitches are now done. What I am going to do this round though, because again, the cup is going to kind of flare out a little bit, we need to widen this a little more at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and do, instead of 28 stitches, single crochets, we're going to do 30 this row. So where I'm going to do the increase is going to be in this first puff stitch that I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and use my stitch marker again. I'm going to do 2 single crochets in that first puff stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and do single crochets again until I get about the halfway point. So again, we had 24, roughly 12, 13, somewhere around that amount of stitches, or if you can just see where the stitch marker is, when you get about halfway past there, you're going to put 2 single crochets into that puff stitch, and then 1 single crochet the rest of the way around. So because we increased twice in this round, there's 2 extra stitches. So we went from 28 to now there should be 30 stitches in this round, 30 single crochets. And what that's going to do is this next round where we do our puff stitches, there's going to be 1 extra puff stitch, and that's just going to widen a little bit. Okay, so there's my 30. So again, I'm going to slip stitch into that first single crochet I did, do a chain 1, put down my marker. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do our puff stitches exactly like we did the first 3 rounds. 3, 4, we're going to pull through all of those, secure it, chain 1, we're going to skip that one, and we're going to go in. So because there's 2 stitches in one spot, it's going to be a little tight right there, but you can see them. Go ahead and make sure you are skipping that first one. Again, we should have now, instead of 14 puff stitches, we should have 15 puff stitches, 15 chain 1 spaces in this round. So we'll go ahead and continue doing puff stitches, because the next round we are going to do an increase again. Our last increase for this cup koozie. Also be our last, we'll be doing one more puff stitch row after the one we're working on now. So these koozies have 5 rows of puff stitches for the 30 to 32 ounce cup size. So split my yarn, don't split yarn. Almost halfway through it. Two, 3, 4, go through all of them, secure it, chain 1, skip 1, next puff stitch, pull through all, secure, chain, skip, puff stitch. We've got just a few left on this row. So 2 more puff stitches. Pull through all, secure, chain 1, skip 1. Right in the middle here, we're going to do this last puff stitch. 3, 4, pull through all, secure without splitting, chain 1, and again we're going to just slip into the top of that puff stitch. I'm going to do a chain 1 and then 1 single crochet into the top of that puff stitch. I'm going to put my marker in there. We're going to jump from 30 to 32. So I'm going to do an increase, a second single crochet into that same stitch, and then we're going to move on to each 1 single crochet for each of the next approximately 15 or 16 stitches. As long as it's on the other side, we're going to do 1 more increase. Again, that's going to take us from 30 stitches to what we want is 32 stitches. So we went from 14 puff stitches to 15 puff stitches. This is going to bring us to 16 puff stitches. I'm doing my increase right here. It's approximately the other end. So with this last round of puff stitches that we'll be doing will be 16. And again, that is just going to open it up a little bit more for the flare out in the cup. The cup flares a little. We need to accommodate to make sure that the koozie is going to fit on the cup snugly and correctly and not slouch down. So there we go. There is my 32 stitches. So I'm going to slip into that first single crochet that I did. I'm going to put down my stitch marker. I'm going to chain 1. Now this is the last row of the puff stitches. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to pull through all those, secure it, chain 1, skip that one, go into the next. So this is going to be repetitive. So for this round, I'm going to go ahead and do it off camera. I will meet you back at the end of this row where we will also do a color change if you're doing the two-tone like I am, because we're just going to do 3 rows of a border on the top. So I'm going to do a color change with those, but work the last row of these puff stitches and I will meet you back at the end of this row. Alright, we're back. I'm finishing just my last puff stitch here of that round, so again we now have 5 rows of puff stitch. We should have 5 rows. So let me go ahead and secure, and don't forget that chain 1 because we're skipping that stitch. I'm going to slip into the top of that first puff stitch of this row, just slipping. I'm going to keep that loop there. I'm going to go ahead and cut my cord because I am doing the two-tone. If you're doing all one color, you don't need to do so. But I'm going to grab my original color from the base, the sage, and I'm just going to pull that through the loop I've got there. I am going to just chain 1, and then I'm going to pull those 2 tails and make sure those stitches are real nice and tight. Now what I'm going to do is do 1 half double crochet in every stitch all the way around. Now remember, we've increased twice, so we should have 32 stitches all the way around. So in each stitch, I'm going to go ahead and do top of that puff stitch is a half double crochet, in between the 2 where that chain 1 is, half double crochet. On top of the next puff stitch, another half double crochet, in between, and so on. So we're just doing that half double crochet all the way around. If you did a color change like I did, you can work over those ends so that they are secured inside these other stitches and held away so that you're not hanging out anywhere, and you don't have to weave them in at the end, because if you've ever done that, it's not the most exciting part of a piece. Alright, so my end piece is trying to hang out, so I'm going to actually move that to the inside where it's flush with that last stitch. I'm going to go ahead and just trim it down, just make sure it's not peeking out. Okay, that was on top of a puff stitch, so I'm going to resume in the space. Just going to keep doing this all the way around. Again, if you are keeping track of your stitches, there should be 32. Okay, coming about halfway around right now. Alright, half double crochets. Alright, and I just have a few left here. Chain space, and top of the puff, and then my last one in that chain space. So now that we have done that, we've made a real nice start to our lip of the koozie here. Now we have 2 rows remaining. So what I'm going to do now to connect, I'm going to go into that 3rd loop in that back. Just do a, oops, that is not the correct loop. You're just going to do a single crochet in that 3rd loop only, not the front loop, not the back loop, but that 3rd loop in the back. So what we're going to do here is it's going to create that little V-stitch border around the side, which I will show you in just a moment. But again, we should have, I'm just going to do it with the stitch marker to make sure I'm not missing a stitch here. But we're going to do this all the way around, single crochet stitches in that 3rd back loop space. Now the reason for going into that 3rd back loop space is to create, if you can see it, you're making another one of those borders like we did at the bottom with those V stitches. It's just going to make a real nice crisp look to the top of the koozie here. So we're just doing those single crochets in that third loop in the back. Now remember, we increased to 32. 32 is going to be the top stitch number we're going to do. Now keep in mind, this is a 30 to 32 ounce koozie size, 32 stitches. Keep that in mind. We want to make sure that we have enough. So we want it to be wide enough to be able to go, you know, fit where the cup is flared out at the top. We want it to have that full coverage to be able to expand, but we also don't want it real loose and nilly-willy where it's going to just slide downward. So now that we are done with those 32 stitches and we have that real nice look, now we're going to give it some stretch, some almost elasticity. So it doesn't slide down the cup. So what I'm going to do is a crisscross, a single crochet crisscross. So to instead of slipping into that next stitch like I generally would to complete that row, I'm going to skip that one and go one past it. I'm going to go into the actual stitch and I'm going to do a single crochet. Now I'm going to go back into that stitch that I skipped. So I'm moving backwards and I'm going to do another crochet. You'll see as we move along, it's going to cause a crisscross, an X look on the top. And what it's doing is it's creating kind of a stronger lip, but it's going to be able to almost stretch a little bit. It's going to kind of have an accordion kind of effect so that it can grip that cup without sliding down. And it just looks much nicer. So before I get to the end here, you can kind of see it's doing kind of a little crisscross stitch. So it just looks a little different, but when we're done, I'll show you that it just kind of stretches a little bit. So we are just about done with this koozie. This was pretty painless, I think. Pretty easy pattern to follow. All right. Roughly halfway, almost halfway through it. So because we have 32 stitches, if we're doing the X's, there should be enough to evenly do 16 of the X's if you're not skipping one too many or making sure you're doing it correctly. Should be 16 X's around the top to complete those 32 stitches. Now I have 2 stitches left, which tells me I counted correctly. There's that. Now I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch into that first stitch there. I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn with a little bit of extra so that I can pull it through. I'm going to grab my Susan Bates handy dandy. She is like my best friend. This needle, I would die without this needle. I'm so glad I got this one. But I'm going to go ahead and apparently split my thread. I'm going to go ahead and thread this onto my needle, and since I can't crochet over the end stitch here, I'm going to get this tail weaved in through some of the stitches on the inside to conceal it so that it doesn't unravel, so that it's not unsightly, kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I'll just go through a couple stitches, do a few knots, and then go ahead and trim that off carefully on the inside, and this koozie is complete. So again, that top looks real nice, but it does have that stretch to it. So it's going to pull itself inward because of that crisscross, so it's holding itself up, but it has the ability to expand out so that it can fit around the cup. And because I blocked that bottom, it is holding its form really, really nicely. So thank you for taking the time to watch this product being made, and I hope you enjoy our koozies. Thank you from KnotSewOrdinary. Bye.